Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Fleeting Thoughts, an altered TCG podcast, part of the Maindeck podcast family. I'm Dan.
And I'm Jordan. And today we're going to be going over the lower cost cards, more specifically, but just kind of in general, the cost of cards and their role in Altered, as there's some implications that you might not think of right away when you come from other games that don't have back and forth turns, where you're required to do something on your turn in order to keep playing on the turn cycle.
I think there are a lot of implications. I think specifically, we'll see in our viewers will see in the title of this one, we're talking about 1 and 2 cost cards, because this is, I mean, we're going to get into it, but Altered, so different than how many other games treat these cards in a number of different ways. And that is like a core realization, I think, for people when they start to sort of level up the way they are thinking about this game. And one of the things that really just makes Altered stand out is very different. Before we do that, Jordan, there's something we have to talk about, which is, since our last episode, a momentous, absolutely momentous event in the TCG world occurred, which was the funding and completion of the Altered TCG Kickstarter. Congratulations. Yes. Congratulations, Equinox.
They've done it. Not only did they do it either, they literally like smashed the hinges off the gates.
Yes. We've gone not just beyond the gates, we've destroyed the gates.
They are the most funded TCG ever by a large margin. I think they literally more than doubled the previous champion. And I guess I don't know Kickstarter as a whole, but I assume they're probably up there in like Kickstarter in general.
So among all tabletop Kickstarters, I believe if this is being sorted correctly, they are the 10th most funded tabletop game Kickstarter of all time, which is pretty impressive considering they're up against Frosthaven, Kingdom Death Monster, Exploding Kittens, the Wormwood modular gaming table, which is like selling literal, like gigantically expensive tables to people.
Yeah, like really expensive, like $10,000 on some of them expensive.
Yeah. The Witcher, Marvel Zombies. I mean, there's a bunch of these just like, wow, like huge tabletop Kickstarters. And down there, number 10 now, above the Binding of Isaac game, above Nemesis Lockdown. Let's see, any other really sweet ones? One of the Zombicides, the Dark Souls board game, destroyed by Altered. That's pretty cool. Yeah. Altered TCG number 10 in the most funded tabletop games of all time. But as far as TCGs is concerned, destroyed the next biggest TCG. Pretty healthy, couple $1 million margin. The next one was, for people who don't know, was called Sorcery TCG. I'm going to pull up the numbers here real quick.
Sorcery TCG, 3 million or something, or close to that.
It's a little tricky because they're in New Zealand dollars. They made 5.7 million New Zealand dollars, but that was around 4 million US. Okay. And this is around like 7. How does the conversion work again?
7 New Zealand to US, or from Euro to US?
Euro to US. US $6.7 million US is what this means.
6.75 roughly if you round the 42 up to 675.
Yes. And I think, okay, so that's one thing, right? Which, like, that's awesome. But the thing that I was most excited about with the final funding of Altered was that backer count underneath.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna mention. Is you'd think that was just a bunch of whales like buying the Divine Pack, but the Divine Pack is one of the least purchased packs that they have going on, which means a lot of that, a bulk of that money is like just a bunch of people, which means tons of people were interested in this project, which is very exciting, because that means we have not only the money to back it and the gameplay, which we already know is ace, but that means there's a large amount of people out there that are interested in some capacity in this game.
Yeah, and I'm about to jump in and do some comparisons. And I want to say, when I do these comparisons, this is not to dunk on Sorcery, because sorcery is a really cool game for a demographic that just really appreciates, adores it. I've talked to people who are super into sorcery. I understand exactly what they love about it. But what I want this to provide is just a sort of a perspective on the magnitude of the interest that exists for Altered. Not saying sorcery bad, Altered good, but just saying here's what happened with the people who love sorcery, but here's where Altered is, just kind of showing the difference between that. I hope that makes sense. But if we look at this number of backers, there were 14,997 backers for Altered. I wish there were 3 more. I'm so sad that there weren't 3 more to get to the even 15,000. But when we compare that to the next highest backed TCG, Sorcery had 6,456 backers. So over twice as many backers for Altered, which is pretty incredible. And just looking at like some numbers of things. Now you mentioned like Altered had a high level with $5,000 that had the Divine Pack. That ended up with 320 backers, which is pretty astounding considering it started out limited to 20.
Yeah. It was definitely a good move for them to uncap it.
Yeah, they uncapped it and then were able to make one wait, that's 1.5 million from that alone, right? I think 300 more backers at 5,000 a piece. Is my math 1, 2, 3? Yeah, I think my math's right. 1.5 million. Quick maths.
Yes, but 1.5 million.
Yeah. Let's see. Sorcery had a collector one. This is kind of interesting, actually. Sorcery had an Avatar of the Realm level that was at $10,000, and they had 4 backers for that. And a collector level that was at $2,500. So one was twice as much, one was half as much as Altered's biggest level. And now the half as much one had 24 backers. I know, because I think we talk a lot about. I think we
so much more.
If you just do the math on this, the with about half as many backers and being a couple $1 million under the backing, that still is a much higher average backer amount. I'm not going to bore people by sitting down and running it on calculator right now, but it's a much higher amount backed per backer in Sorcery. But it must be a lot of add-ons, right? That just happens. Here they have the Sorcerer level for Sorcery had 1,569 backers. That was the $750 level, which was 1 case of boosters. Altered had 750 on the Legendary Game Genic pack. That was 3 boxes. Had 2,987 at the Master pack. That was 4 boxes. But they weren't offering like a case level exactly. So, I'm just trying to find like where these differences are. I think when it comes down to it, it's going to be in just like there must be people added a lot of add-ons. And like the pledge manager later or something. Now Sorcery had 2,960 backers at the 1 booster box level, and the 1 booster box level for a Kickstarter TCG. That's kind of, I think, the most common entry point, because it's the entry point where you're like, yeah, I'm going to get a box and I'm going to see what I get and then play with that. Very common in TCGs in general for people to just pick up 1 box when a set comes out or something. It's not usually breaking the bank too much, but it is putting a significant investment for most people, and it's a reasonable place to get a good collection. When we look at Altered's expert pack level, which is the 1 booster box level and 2 starter decks, 8,232 backers, which is 3 to 4 times as many. Which is like, that's the point where I look at that and I see, wow, like we really got a lot of people who are here to play Altered, right? To just check it out, see what they get, build some decks, and have a good time.
Very much so.
But yeah, it was an incredible campaign. They smashed every stretch goal. The funniest part, I think, of the campaign was that final stretch goal where they're like, okay, we're going to put the stretch goal here at, what was it, like 3.8 million or something. We're not going we're not going to stress about getting to 4 million or whatever.
Yeah.
We're just going to, you unlock it here and then we're all done. Okay. And then it went to 6 million after that.
Yeah, I was actually talking with one of the other buddies like the day or so before, and I was like, I know normally the Kickstarters like the last couple hours things always like just skyrocket because people are like, the panic of, oh, it's ending now, I gotta choose something and get something just because they want to see how it pans out in the early days. But I was like, oh, I don't know if we're gonna make that. Like I had confidence we would, but the 3.7 mil euro was 300,000 above the last one, and I was like, oh, there's only 24 hours left to make like 300,000, and things were starting to die down, and I was like, oh, maybe, I mean, we might make it, we'll see. And our buddy Cole was just like, nah, they'll make it, it's fine. And I was like, okay, we'll see. And then literally the next morning, I was like, oh, never mind. They're already like a million above what it is. And it was like 12 hours left. And I was like, oh, we're blasting.
Yeah, should have trusted Cole. Had some incredible adjustments made to these booster boxes. At that final stretch, it was 3.7 million euro. I have it in front of me now. This last one, I'm going to be honest, is what got me to add more boxes onto my pledge. I ended up with more than one case ordered. The final stretch goal was the golden booster every 250 boosters, or as we call it in other TCGs, a God pack. And the golden booster in Altered, when you open one up, again, it will not look any different than any other booster, except you'll open this bad boy up and it will have 10 uniques and 4 unique foilers inside the pack. Which is like, I saw that and thought, I just want in my life to have opened one of these. That's just what I'm interested in. I want to have opened a golden booster because I like that. To me, takes the excitement of opening a cool and valuable card in a booster pack up to 11, because I'm not only I'm getting 10 cool and unique cards, but these ones are literally like only unique. Only in this pack. This one golden booster was the only way to get all 10 of these cards. I think that just blows my mind. I already understand the system. I get why it's exciting, but that's so much excitement in one booster. You'd be looking at every single card going, whoa, this thing's crazy. Whoa, this thing's crazy. Like,
and then the cherry on top is just being like, you then get to choose 4 of any of the other uniques, including the ones in that pack, to be like, these bad boys are going to be foiled up.
I will say too, I've seen the foils in person as they've been working with them. Beautiful. They're very nice, clean, just a flat rainbow foil, but excellent plating. So the subject stands out from the foil in the background and everything. And they're going to look nice foils.
Very excited.
A few other things happened to our booster boxes that we had. I mean, as you guys saw, there's lots and lots of alternate arts, which are really cool. Every booster box has a 37th booster, and the players who got the lowest level, the 2 starter deck levels, are going to get a free booster as well, which is nice.
I think stretch goals added an additional card that has a 50% chance of being rare.
Yes. Yeah. That was really cool too. Additionally, every other pack, you're getting one more rare as well, which is just going to be really nice for filling out your sets of things with a, smaller number of packs. Going to be able to get everything you need to play your favorite decks. Okay. Here are a couple things that really got me going crazy. Drop rate for unique cards is 1 every 6 boosters now. In Altered's Kickstarter boxes only. And the thing that I think is really interesting about that too, like obviously the Kickstarter boosters are juiced up compared to the regular ones. But you know what's going to bother you, Jordan? You in particular. Well, I think a lot of people, though.
Particular.
Not really bother, but one thing you're going to think, I think a lot of people are going to think, is that you'll have opened up all your Kickstarter product. You'll have all your cool uniques. And you'll go to the store and you'll see the regular edition booster packs with the 1 in 8 unique drop on the shelf. And you'll still think there could be some really cool uniques in there.
That's the great thing about the 1 of 1 unique thing, is it's like, man, no matter what happens, it's always going to be exciting to open packs. When you go to your locals, you get your prize support. There's always a chance that you're going to crack something super exciting. It's going to be an interesting feeling to always have that excitement, because nowadays, like with some of the other games we play, there's still those chase cards that are always exciting to open. Like Grand Archive has CSRs, there'll be showcases and Star Wars, but as far as gameplay implication, it's they're the same as the regular versions. But in this now, every pack could potentially have something where you're like, oh, I want to build a deck around this character now. And obviously, it won't it's not going to lead the deck to victory every time, but just knowing it's a possibility, to just pull it and have it be a potential out some of the time is an
Yeah.
exciting thing.
And I pointed out because I think a lot of people will look at this and go, well, why would anyone buy retail when they can find these booster boxes that are way better? Um, these booster boxes, being as juiced as they are, will very likely go for more than a retail box will, if you try to buy one. Uh, but also, those retail boxes, man, they have different cards. They literally just have different cards in them still. A small amount of them, but there will still be people, like as these run out, or if these prices are priced too high, people will still go, you know what? I'm just gonna buy the retail ones because I bet the uniques in there are really sweet. And like you literally can't get the uniques in there in the Kickstarter boxes, even if you tried. You can't get them. They're different. They're completely different. And I think that's just that's so novel to me. We got one extra foiler every 4 boosters. Pretty cool, just for being able to get those foils for your decks. Speaking of foils for your decks, this part I thought this is a really neat stretch goal. All alternate unique cards will be foiled in Kickstarter boosters. So we talked about all these alternate arts that you can get. Like they added, one of the later ones they added was the Dixit artist Marie. I'm sorry, what am I saying? Dixit artist Marie, and a French last name, I think, and I'm just not even going to try with it. But Marie C, the Dixit artist, did an alternate artwork. And with any of these alternate artworks that you open, if you open a unique alternate artwork card, it will be foil in the Kickstarter packs. Which is also just a really neat nod, like, hey, you got something really cool, because these Kickstarter packs are the only place where your uniques will have that art. It also means that when you open up one of the uniques of that card in a regular booster pack, in a non-Kickstarter one, that's going to have different art now, and that's going to be a neat thing to chase. And it will not only have different effects, but it will have a different art as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one thing I was going to mention too. Is one of the big upgrades in the Kickstarter is there's a fairly sizable handful of characters and cards that are going to have unique art to the Kickstarter. Mechanically, uniques aside, the common and rare versions will be the same as their non-Kickstarter counterpart, but it's still cool to have that little extra choice and selection and some cool artwork on that front.
Yeah,
because there are some of the alt arts I'm really going to be gunning for because they look really sick.
they do. Yeah, I really there's this Loki one whose artwork is Loki like buying altered cards or playing with altered cards in a card shop or something. Like, I think that's really sweet. That's super cool. Yeah. Anyway, I mean, that's, we could gush probably about the Kickstarter all day.
I was going to say we should move on.
But congratulations, Equinox, for creating a game that absolutely smashed it on Kickstarter. Showed an incredible, just an incredible desire for this game. I've talked to so many people who have picked the game up and have tried playing it, and they've gone, "Oh wait, like this is actually a really great game. This is actually really, really fun." And have gotten into the Kickstarter right at the last minute to be able to join in the excitement with all of us. So they've also posted infinite lore updates, and I got to read those at some point because I'm getting way far behind.
I started reading them when they started creeping out, and now they've been coming out with a lot more. And I've been busy, and now there's a huge backlog of them that I want to read. Or I also thought maybe I'll wait because they mentioned that in the app when you scan the card, part of the cards page in your collection will have all the art, the lore, and some extended lore for you to read into. So maybe I'll just wait and organically read through it as I pull the cards.
Honestly, I was just thinking about this. You made me think about this. Maybe what I'm going to do is when I have all the cards in my hand, I'm just going to when I'm in bed, like just kind of scrolling or whatever before I decide to try and fall asleep for the night. Maybe I'll just start reading some altered lore. Like I'll just have access to it on my phone. I'll whip open my app and I'll just start reading. Hey, what's going on with Nevenka these days? And I'll just that sounds kind of cool. Like get immersed that way. I want to mention just one more thing before we move on because it's kind of interesting. But Kickstarter does track the countries where the backers come from. So I think people are interested in knowing what the breakdown kind of looks like for this game. The first thing I want to mention is they separate returning backers and new backers. So Altered had 9,368 returning backers. So these are people who have backed a previous Kickstarter project. They knew what they were up to. And then that's you. And then 5,629 new backers who had never backed a project on Kickstarter before, saw Altered and thought, this looks cool. I'm going to try this Kickstarter thing out.
That's impressive.
I think that is pretty impressive, actually. I mean, I think the breakdown, I was looking at sorceries just now out of curiosity. I'm going to use it as a point of comparison again. It's just interesting to compare since it was previously the biggest one for TCGs. And sorcery had 4,000 returning backers and 2,000 new backers. So about twice as many returning as new. Altered it's still pretty close. It was like, near 10,000 and near 5,000, but actually it was like a little weighted actually towards new backers in comparison, where there were slightly more new backers than half of the returning backers. As far as where the countries they came from, France, not too surprisingly, 7,356 backers. So half of the backers in this are in France. And like, I get it, of course, right? It's like that's where it's from. Everyone in France who's a TCG fan wants to check it out because, like, how often does a new TCG come out from their home country? Not often that I'm aware of. This is the time I think that I've heard of ever. Second place, United States, makes sense. The sort of TCG capital of the world in a way, I guess. United States had 3,200 backers. So here's an interesting point. Compared to Sorcery, United States was the most backers with 4,142. Whereas this is actually fascinating to me. Holy cow. I'm sorry. I know this is an Altered podcast, but Sorcery was from New Zealand in New Zealand dollars and had 84 New Zealand backers, which is like, I thought there'd be more. But Sorcery really felt like was highly focused on Magic, old school Magic players. And it makes sense to me. I don't know why, but it makes sense to me that's from the US. Yeah. But I mean, US 3,200 backers, that's more backers than were existed in total for Grand Archive, and that's plenty of backers to hopefully find LGSs to support the game and start launching things here. And following them, we had Germany, Italy, Canada, Belgium, United Kingdom, a lot of European countries after that as well. So excited for France to build their extremely strong Altered community. Excited for the US to hopefully build it up from there as well. And for Europe to hopefully get a lot of love. Because I know in these Kickstarter campaigns, sometimes Europe is left in the dark for a while. So hopefully I'm hoping Equinox is really working to get it in distribution there with the big excitement they have in France and then beyond.
Same.
Okay.
I expect they'll have a good grip on the European markets.
Better, hopefully, than most US TCG creators, right?
Yeah,
like
they have the benefit of living in, the greater European area. So
we should hope that conveys some sort of benefit in working with those distributors, because from what we hear from the US, it's always a complicated market to break into.
For sure.
Okay, so we're going to talk a lot in just a moment about 1 and 2 drops and how Altered is wild and different, and hopefully it's sort of an interesting little conversation. But before we do, I just want to mention, if you want to support Maindeck and the Maindeck family of podcasts, there are 2 ways you can always support us. Number 1 is by doing the cool algorithm things like liking the video, commenting on the video, subscribing to the channel, 5-star reviews on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you're listening to us to. That is all super appreciated. Thank you guys so much for supporting us that way. And then the second thing you can do is, if you play any other TCGs than Altered, and you want to buy your cards on TCG Player, because that is where a lot of US players buy their cards. I don't have anything for Card Market yet. I'm sorry. So nothing there works for if you're in the EU or something. But if you buy on TCG Player, you can use our link, our affiliate link down in the description below to purchase your cards, or go to bit.ly/shoptcgs. Purchase your cards that way, and we will get a little kickback, which is really cool. So that's how you can do it. Thank you so much for your support. Jordan, why is Altered? Why am I building my decks and I'm seeing these 1 and 2 drops, and they just feel so much better to me in Altered than other games? Why is that? Let's talk about it.
Yes,
lead us off.
For sure. So, coming into the game for the first time, if you're from other games such as Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, all that jazz, you're probably somewhat, even if it's not something you're thinking about, but intuitively you try to play on the curve, which, for those who are unaware of what that is, and for example, just use Magic because it's the easiest case. In Magic, your resources, you can play 1 a turn unless you have some special effects, but let's just say you don't have any of those in your deck. You play 1 mana. Your goal with your deck and your construction is each turn to play a card that is on your mana curve. So turn 1, you're going to have 1 mana. Turn 2, you have 2 mana. 2 and 3, if you have 3. And the idea, as you know, the power of your card scales with its cost, or it should if the game is balanced properly. You generally want to play the best thing you can for the turn. So in something like Magic, your turn 1, you're looking to find something that costs 1, play it. Turn 2, you cost 2, you play it. Turn 3, you play something costs 3. In this game, however, you can do that, but there's a ton of value in playing cards that cost 1 and 2. And in this game, you start with 3 resources. So like I said, intuitively from other card games, your idea is like, why would I even put these in my deck? I can start off with a 3 cost, make sure I have them in my hand, and just start blasting sides. But you'll quickly notice in this game, they have a very potent and powerful ability, which is it allows you to do multiple things in a turn. Because unlike other games where you do your turn, Dan, and then I do my turn, we go back and forth. And what you do affects what I want to do, and what I want to do is affected by what you're going to do. So if you have a bunch of 1 costs versus your 3 costs, you'll drop a 3 cost, and sure, it may be big, it may be beefy, it may be unbeatable on the turn that you play it, but if I'm going first, I can play a 1 cost, and then I get to see where you commit your big 3 cost thing at, which then gives me the power to play around it. Basically, I get to set the tempo of that round, because I know you're all tapped out now, and I can put something somewhere that's uncontested, and there's nothing you can do about it because you spent all of your resources on a single drop. And that is one of the big power plays that you can do with 1 and 2 costs.
It also works the other way. So these 1 cost cards are, in a way, you know, Izmir has an ability called After You. After You, and we're actually, this is going to come up a little later in the podcast too, which is going to be kind of fun. But After You is a deceptively powerful ability. When people first get into the game, they might not realize just how good this thing is. But that Izmir character, I'm just totally blanked on her name now. I'm so terrible. I'm such a terrible Altered fan.
Their names are hard to remember for me too. I always give them different names.
Akisha got nerfed. I don't know if you guys know this. Akisha used to be stronger. Jordan knows this because Jordan played in the Gen Con demo with the stronger Akisha when she was able to use her ability. What did it do? Did it let you like draw and discard or something when it wasn't your turn, or you just had to pay to to After You? Is that right?
I can't remember now. I remember it was better than it currently is.
I think right now it's you just After You if you started the
Have the
round.
first player, yeah.
But I think previously it was pay 1 to after you, or pay 0 if you started the round.
I think that's what it was.
I think that's what it was. Yeah. I'm going to be mixing some things up, but that's what I believe it was. So you could always do the after you, even if you had to pay a resource for it. And paying a resource for it was worth in a lot of cases.
100%.
Yeah. So that is strong because it forces your opponent to make the first move, and sometimes, just for some decks, some players, it means committing a lot of resources to one side, and then you, as the player going second, now gets a ton of information about what your turn should look like. Should you commit that big thing to the board and fight them where they're fighting for, or should you try and play the other side of the board, committing maybe fewer things? Anytime you're going later now, if you have these 1 and 2 drop cards in your hand, especially some of the cheeky 1 drops, sometimes you can watch your opponent commit all out to their one side of the board. And this classic Izmir play, just stick your little 1 drop on the other side and go, okay, that one's mine then. And you are able to spend far fewer resources than your opponent in order to gain advantage on the board. I think that tempo thing you're talking about is already like a really massive difference in this game compared to others. And it is created by the fact that you have two sides of the expedition that you have to fight for each round, and your units do not stick around turn to turn. So it means every single turn you are looking once again at the two sides and trying to figure out how to win a numbers battle on either one. Where is going to be the most effective route? And having these small cost units in your deck gives you flexibility not only in that tempo, but just in where they're deploying. I've been playing, and I think this is what really got me thinking about this too. I've been playing in our last gameplay video I did. I've been playing this Tristan Rossum Axiom deck. That deck, I'm going to be really clear. This is not the card pool for it. I think I say that plenty of times in the video, but this is a very Sierra and oddball card pool that also works super well with Subhash, the third Axiom one. But Traced is left a little bit out of the fun because it is so landmark focused that it just I've tried building Traced with landmarks multiple times, and it's just awkward because Traced needs to build up a bunch of it needs to build up to about turn 4 or 5 for his ability to even do anything, and you just can't be committing landmarks early on. So instead, that deck is full of these like 1 and 2 drops, and what you're trying to do is just play these little things out so that you can play them again from reserve and build up his counters really quickly so that you can then start to get way more cards than your opponent going. And when you have way more cards than your opponent, having a bunch of 1 and 2 drops gets rid of their inherent drawback, which is that you'll run out of your hand fast when you are only playing. If you think about it this way, other than that, all the flexibility stuff we talked about, the main difference between a 1 and a 2 drop and a 3 drop is that to get the same power as a 3 drop, I had to play 2 different cards, right? So if you can find a way to get around that drawback and keep your cards flowing with particular heroes or other cards, notice Izmir has a lot of card draw also, which is really good for that. Then you are able to you can match the power of some of the biggest threats in the game, but you can maintain extreme flexibility as you're doing it. And there are few other card games where this late into the game, your 1 and 2 drops are just as relevant as they were turn 1. But Altered, that I find to always be the case as long as you're able to sort of manage that aspect.
Yes. And another great note about the, as we said, we're going to be talking about the power of 1 and 2 drops. So another great point behind them is, unlike other games in Altered, it doesn't matter if you're winning your side by 300 or 1. The only point is you have to beat them on whatever terrain it is. So being able to play those 1 and 2 drops, you force your opponent to play, even if they're not going to play that big bomb that we mentioned and they're going to try to match you with 1 and 2 drops, making them kind of bleed out where they're committing and the stat lineups that are going to each section lets you choose the best way to use the cards in your hand. If I know I only need to win on mountain and he just played his big mountain card on the left side, there's a good chance that I can just play my mountain on the right side. Or let's say we're matching and I have the last play because I played a couple of weaker units. I only need to beat you on mountain. Your weakest stat on that line is mountain. Having the knowledge of knowing that because you had to play first allows me to beat your 3 or 4 cost with a 1 cost just because that is the only stat my card had on it, and that is the weakest stat your card had on it. And the only way I knew that was because I got to play after you.
I think that thing you mentioned right away, I would just want to reframe it a little bit because I think it was super an easy thing to miss. But a lot of the time, you may have 1 and 2 drops. You may even build your deck with more of them depending on the leader you're playing or something, the hero you're playing. But you may have more of those little 1 and 2 drops to be flexible with. And if your opponent has either drawn this way or built their deck maybe in a way where they've lowered their options a little bit, your opponent may have a hand that's only like 3 and 4 drop units. And all you have to do is put out your little 1 drop on one side. And if they want to fight you there, they have to spend half their turn to put something down over there, which opens you up to just taking the other side completely. And you can really mess your opponent up in certain ways with that. Just cheeky little 1 drops, man. They're just there's sometimes they're a little weak. And we do have the mana orb system too. Like that's the other thing to talk about here too, is like late in the game too, if the 1 drop isn't very good anymore, it's an easy mana orb. We talked a lot in the last episode with the comparison between Star Wars Unlimited and Altered. And this is one point that I found a lot. And when I'm playing Star Wars Unlimited, I don't often want to play 1 drops past the early game. They usually become pretty quick mana orb plays because it doesn't have the same system. It's not quite the same. They're not called mana orbs in that game, but it's the same concept. But instead in Altered, every time I'm looking at those 2 cards, I'm like, I don't know. Like this could be really, really good right now. Like I'm not sure what I want to put it down because like the 1 drops are always quite relevant. It just depends entirely on your strategy and the situation and what makes sense for you to do in any situation. The 1 drops too, the 1 drops that are 1 drops out of reserve as well. Like that's double cheeky power, right? Is like you get to play it now. And then later on, you have that guy sitting there. You might not need it. You might end up just discarding it or something, but it is, they also allow you to fill out your curve really effectively each turn. You talked about that earlier, using all the mana you have. And in a lot of card games, that involves playing escalatingly powerfully costed cards. 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop, 4 drop, 5 drop. But in Altered, you get these situations where you go, I really want to take both sides. It's turn 3 and I really want to try to take both sides. And one option is play a 3 drop, but another option is play 2 drops and a 1 drop. And you can like do exactly what we're saying. Start with the 1 drop to fish out where your opponent's going, then move the 2 drops where they're most effective. Or you can move the 2 drops out there and then use the 1 drop as that cheeky surprise. Because Jordan, how often are you playing a game of Altered and you are watching your opponent's mana orbs and they have 1 orb left and you're like, maybe they don't have anything to play, or maybe they do, and I'm not sure. And my math is entirely, I have to make a guess based on whether or not I think they have the 1 drop, because it will determine whether or not I can win this side if I put it here.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting choices you have to make because of the implications of the 1 drops, like you said, basically being relevant through the whole game. There's so many matchups where we're even on both sides. I have basically 1 play left and they have 1 untapped or 1 non-exhausted. I forgot the actual term for this specific game.
Ready? I think ready.
Yeah. I believe that's correct. But yeah, they'll have
I did a video on it. I should know, but
yeah, it's just we're card game players. We tend to just default to the thing that everyone always says. But
Yeah.
yeah, so it'll be a tough choice because you're like, you could even do stuff where there's been times where I'm thinking like I'm winning on this lane, and they could have something that stops it, and I could just save this card in my hand for later and then not play it. But then if they play that one drop, now there's a good chance that I lose this side. So, like, do I play this to secure the victory, or do I save it and hope that they're just mind gaming me and they don't actually have anything left to play? Or like, it makes every choice like this is a real consideration. What do I do? When is it important? Is this card going to be important later? Do I lose now if they, cut me off here? Like, you got to think a couple steps ahead to kind of compensate for the, you know, you got to play around it basically, which, like you said, in most other card games, the one drop late in the game isn't even a consideration. You're like, oh, I don't even care. They have one resource unreadied. That means nothing almost for the most part. But in this game, one unreadied could be the difference between losing, a lane and not.
Yeah. And the implications are really interesting too. So, one thing about having 1 and 2 drops and 3 drops in your deck is that you have these turn ones that are just really fascinating. There are so many more options because Altered starts you with 3 mana orbs on your turn 1 than in, and like no, I'm not, it's not quite any, but than most other TCGs on the market. Coincidentally, another TCG we really like, Grand Archive, has a lot of options for your turn 1 also, because pretty much anything in your hand is playable. But hey, I guess I just like that mechanic in games. I like going into my starting turn 1 and going, wow, I have options. Like that's so much fun, and is sadly there's too many games where that isn't the case.
Yeah, it's that specific thing you're talking about is extremely refreshing, and probably why I really like Grand Archive and Altered, and to a certain degree Star Wars as well, because it not as flexible as Altered because you only start with 2, but just having that makes every game feel different. Because one of the reasons I stopped playing Magic back in the day is decks, even though I'd craft my own deck, they started to feel stale to me because you'd craft a deck, and because of the mana curve thing, most turns 1 through 4 of a deck that you've played and refined is you're looking to do the exact same thing every single time, because a good Magic deck is a consistent Magic deck, and doing the same thing over and over again is generally what your game plan is, versus something like Grand Archive or Altered. It's more fun for me personally because I love that moment to moment gameplay, the moment to moment decision making. And in games like this, where you have that more open turn 1 experience, I could play with the same deck 30 times and have a different opener every single time. And they could all be, varying amounts of, good or bad, depending on what the opponent does as well, because they also have a varying amount of openers that they could do.
Yeah. Like I've seen some super crazy openers. Like I love in Muna, I love doing a Muna Druid, with Tasia especially. Muna Druid turn 1 is like a powerful play to take one side. But when you commit that 3 drop out there turn 1, then if your opponent who has the cheeky like 2 and 1 drop hand, depending on the 2 drop, they can actually still take you on one side. There's a Lyra 2 drop that has 4 water. And 0 on the other 2 stats. Super good turn 1 with a 1 drop, because you can drop that on the side where they put the 3 drop off, and often still take a progression on that side, even though they also get 1. And you can then push your 1 drop onto the other side where they can't play anything, and you can start out like rushing out the gate with that coveted double progression turn 1. Which Lyra could really use, because sometimes they get some shaky turns sometimes just based on how things shake out. So it's really, really nice to be able to secure that kind of thing. So just having 1 and 2 drops in your deck, as well as 3 drops, just gives you like these crazy, crazy flexible turn 1s. And it's to the point where it's like, I feel like it's harder in Altered to build a deck that just doesn't like function out of the start, as long as you just make sure you put in some 1 and 2 drops. And you'll usually include 3 drops because there's a lot of really good 3 drops in the game. I think that is going to be a point towards Altered's like casual friendliness, where there in other card games, it's easy to build a deck that just doesn't work very well. Now I'm going to pick on Grand Archive because it's such a like competitive and intricate game. Like you can easily build decks that just like can't keep up. But in Altered, I think a lot of the time, just like don't only put in 5-drops in your deck, and like you'll have turn like Altered doesn't even need a mulligan. Like that's one of the craziest things to me is that like there is no mulligan in Altered, and there's no ways like to adjust what your opening hand is either, which is what Grand Archive has. But still, it's just it works. I've never had an opening hand where I haven't had a turn 1 play, and I played a lot of games so far, actually.
Yeah, I think that situation has only happened to me a singular time. And it wasn't that I didn't have anything to play. It was more so that I had, some actions and event cards that I was just, it wasn't worth it to play because it was like, oh, I'm going to bounce your person, but your other person's still going to win that side anyway. So there's no reason to do it. But it
because
was
they had 2
extremely
and 1
bad luck.
drops. Because
Yeah,
they had 2 and
exactly.
1 drops.
So they ended up like double advancing, and I had nothing.
Yeah,
Um,
I
but
guess that'll
tis the
happen
nature of it.
sometimes.
Yeah, and
You
it
maybe
was with the demo decks too, so it was extremely unlikely because
oh
I
yeah.
drew like the the opening 6 was 6 of the I think 7 or 8 at like non-character cards in the deck. So like I literally drew all of the non-character cards in one hand, which is not going to
Ouch.
happen in your average deck, especially with
Yeah,
the decks being larger and a full actual constructed and starter decks.
that's
The demo decks were cut back by 10 cards, so it's a lot easier to randomly draw the anti god hand, if you will.
yeah, the devil hand. Which actually so I don't know. That's actually a really funny segue, but do you have anything else to add about this? I just thought it was a fun little topic to talk about a little bit.
I think we covered most of it. I wanted to basically just touch on their flexibility, the ability to make your opponent commit or show their hand, the ability, the stat lines in this game being relevant because you only need to win by 1 and you don't always need to win on all 3. So being able to see what your opponent does and then just be like, all right, they're low on mountain. I'm just going to play my mountain guy and beat this.
Yeah.
They just have a lot of power and a lot of flexibility to your actions in play, and you should consider them. And again, we talked a lot about how great they are. That doesn't mean your deck should only be 1 2 drops. There is time and place for 3 4 5 6. They definitely hold their weight, but just give more consideration to them than you might not have coming from other TCGs where normally you just want to play the best thing you can in the moment.
Absolutely. And I'm sort of ending the conversation there because we're going to attempt to actually remember to go through a few more of our lingering mailbag questions here. And
Yes.
both of these are going to have callbacks to our previous bits of conversation here, which is exciting. So we're going over 2 more questions today. These are our last 2 questions that we got on Reddit when we put out our mailbag call. So let's start with I think you're highlighting this one because this was maybe a little deeper to talk about. We have a question from Metante Jesus, who asks, will each faction ever get additional heroes? For example, I really think the current Izmir hero is pretty terrible. After you every other turn, no thanks. Give me the Ortis 1/1 instead. Jordan, let's start at the beginning. Do you think the factions are ever going to get additional heroes?
I think it's just going to be these original, 3 per faction. I don't think there's any space for anything else.
Well, Jordan, you are a long-term TCG fan, so like how TCGs work, but that's not always obvious to everybody.
Yeah, for sure. No, but yeah, assuming I do want to preface this with assuming that the game doesn't die, which we're very hopeful it won't. We know they have plans for the future, and based on the reception of the Kickstarter, I don't see it dying anytime soon. And based on how much the gameplay slaps, it's going to stick around for a while. So yes, I do believe that there will be more, and I believe this question was posted before they showed the other sets, so they might have not even known that there was 3 for each faction. Which now everyone knows that they've announced them well in advance now. But yes, they will also probably get some. I don't know if it's going to be every set. I imagine making an entire new archetype of heroes every single set is probably not as, might be a little hard, but at the same time, they've knocked it out of the park with this. Who knows? Maybe they plan on having not, three for every faction every single set, but I guarantee you there will be more heroes coming soon. And then the second part of the that they mentioned, which is actually I feel like is everyone's first response when they see the Izmir hero that has After You. Because even me and Dan, we read that card at Gen Con, we're like, this seems like a terrible ability. And literally 4 turns in, where both of us are like, this is the best ability in the game.
Yeah, for real.
Because it just takes a few turns to get the realization of like making your opponent give you information before you make your first move is so good.
Yeah. And I will say too, they said no thanks, give me the Ortis one when it said Sigismar is really good. Like
Yes.
really just like straightforward, like this is good. This is a good ability. It's not bad. It's just good. Whereas the Izmir one does require a little more finesse, right? It requires you to understand a little bit of like why you want them to go first and how to respond to what they're doing and how to build your deck to be able to respond to what they're doing. But as you mentioned, Jordan, this was posted pretty early on before I think a lot of the other heroes were revealed, before the Kickstarter even launched, actually. So yeah, definitely. So since then, Izmir has gotten several other heroes, two other heroes for Izmir that if you don't like, maybe you just don't like it. You just don't like After Youing your opponent. You want to do something else. You can play the one that involves sacrificing your stuff to make a big Maw token really huge, or you can play the one that is putting boost counters on your characters when you cast spells. Either way, I think you'll find something to enjoy in Izmir if you like the idea of Izmir, but you weren't a huge fan of Akisha.
Yes, I hope that they find the right play style for them, because it's a wonderful thing. I've been there too, where you try a couple things and your original thing when you see, you're like, oh, that looks cool. You play it, it just doesn't gel with you. So I hope, obviously they're into the Ortis faction, but hopefully if you did really want to play with those Ysmir cards, you've found one of the other 2 options and you really gel with those. So
yes. And as far as when factions will get heroes, I mean, they're going to at some point. There's going to be more added. I also don't know. I couldn't tell you which sets heroes are planning to be added in or whatever. I do know that they're really building out a lot of lore about these characters. So it like wouldn't surprise me to see them waiting a little bit, and diving more into like what's going on with these 18 characters in the story before they just start throwing more in, shoving more characters in, and kind of like filling out with more stories. I think I would guess they would like to really give these stories some depth with these characters before they start to necessarily move into too many more, if that makes sense. I don't think you're going to see like 18 every single set. That'd be a lot.
Yeah, and one last bit about that, some secret tech, just this is my own mental idea of what I'm expecting for the future based on the card art and UI.
We love Jordan's secret tech. Let's go.
So you notice that all the hero cards in the game have the specific spots to show what their reserve and landmark are. All of the ones on the first set are 2 and 2, probably because it's easier to teach people when everyone has an even playing field of 2 and 2. But I'm assuming since they have specific spots on the UI for the cards, that in the future there will be heroes where that changes. So maybe you'll get, an Axiom hero that can have 4 landmarks and only 1 reserve or no reserve or something to compensate for it. And you can build and cater your playstyle around those as well.
Yep.
Which will be very exciting in the future.
Definitely looks like design space to me. So we'll see how they mess around with that later. Like a no reserve hero. What kind of ability does a hero with no reserve have to be balanced? Like that'd be interesting.
Yeah. Or maybe their ability will link in to, if a card would go to reserve, you get something and it gets discarded instead.
Yeah.
Which would also be, there'd
so
be
much
some cool
space.
implications with that.
So much design space. I love it.
Yes.
Okay, one more question. Our last question from Reddit. This is going to be from Dracogus1234. And this is an interesting one because it just shows, you know, the variety of people that are into these games and how we can make it a welcoming environment for everybody too. So Dracogus1234 asks, "Hey, so I'm a religious man and I don't like to play games that have too many dark themes. I love how this game currently is, and so just have a question about the characters. I see some demon type, and so I was wondering if some angelic ones will come later as well." Um, the thing that really caught me about this question that I thought was kind of interesting was that there has certainly been a willingness already to explore mythologies and stories and like real people and mythological characters and all sorts, like everything basically. Um, so uh, it is interesting to wonder exactly, you know, if they intend to ever approach like Christian type characters in some way, and like angels that use names like Michael and, you know, other sorts of names of angels that are from the Christian sort of worldview. Um, I think my initial take on this, and Jordan, you'll have to let me know in just a second, but my initial take on this is that uh, I don't think you're going to see like Satan in the game, right? But like demons are really easy to just kind of, demons have just been like, are just sort of like generic monsters at this point in games. Um, and they're used all sorts of things and not really necessarily even considered to be tied to any particular mythology anymore. Um, Angels are maybe like a little more tied to, you know, particular like especially particular depictions of them tied to like Christian, like early Christian artwork, like Renaissance art that would depict the angels in very like as beautiful figures with wings and flowing hair and everything. um so but at the same time, like Magic the Gathering has no problem throwing angels and demons everywhere in every single plane, even if it doesn't make any sense. There are angels and demons and dragons there. They just because people like them, because they're popular. Um, so I would say that you know, it wouldn't surprise me to see some angels worked in, but it would maybe. I'm just curious. I would be curious where, you know, where they're sort of, if they're going to actually make direct references to particular like Christian angels or something, or if they'll just work them in as sort of like imaginary figures in the same way Magic does. But I bet at some point we'll see some. What do you think, Jordan?
I would say I'm in a similar boat as you, except I think it's a higher likelihood that they'll make something such as an angel, because, like you said, in a lot of card games and a lot of just gaming in general, the mythos and the archetype of an angel or angelic character or a race of characters is very prominent, especially when you do have demons present. Sometimes they want to make sure both sides of the coin are met. And also, we already have some characters that are very adjacent to that already, like John d'Arc, or
Oh
I
yeah,
know it's
Joan of
Joan
Arc.
of Arc, but they did the French pronunciation, which
Yeah,
I'm really bad and I don't want to butcher it. But and
you
she
already did.
has,
Don't worry.
I know, and yeah, so they have the holy crown already, like the glowing halo
Mm.
crown
Yeah,
in the
true.
art. So it's just a stone's throw away from having an actual like angelic figure or just a straight up angel, or maybe one of the more famous angels, like the named angels might be there, like the justice. I'm very bad with their actual lore names, but I know that they have certain ones that represent like justice and things like that. So I think it'll probably happen at some point, or at least be very adjacent. I definitely would not be surprised if that happens.
I mean, that's a good point about Joan of Arc too. Like we're already getting some of that sort of that the Christian ideal imagery in there. Um, you know, it is always just it's a little bit of a question of like sensitivities for for religions that are currently popular and ongoing in the world. Whereas like it's pretty easy to be like, here's Loki, here's Osiris, here's, you know, like uh Hades or whatever. Like you could do any of those. It's not like really a big deal because there just isn't, there aren't people around to really get offended by anything you do with those figures. Whereas ones for ongoing, like modern day religions, is it's just a little bit of a trickier territory. Just to make sure everybody feels comfortable at the table, playing this fantasy game together.
For sure.
So yeah, but yeah, I mean, maybe you're right. You're probably right. We'll probably see some more of that sooner rather than later, if that's the case. Just hopefully, as usual, hopefully it's done tastefully and to not offend anybody or anything, because that's the last thing. It's the last thing we want. Card games are for everybody to play and feel comfortable with. I'm hoping that Dracogus, I'm hoping that the demon types, the fact that there are some like Asmodeus is in there and everything are not necessarily too like offensive. I don't believe there's any, it's intended to be a demonic game or anything, but actually that suddenly got me thinking. I had to pull up Asmodeus. The demon Asmodeus is I'm going to sound really smart, I'm just reading it from Google, is a figure in the apocryphal book of Tobit, as well as in Jewish demonology and other religious sources. So that is already getting at, I guess a modern day religion. So
yeah, and
interesting.
Something that came to mind to me when this question was read off is the creators of the game also said when we first met them in Gen Con is they want to pull from all walks of life, all countries, all backgrounds. So that's another reason why I'm very confident at some point it will get representation, just because they specifically want to pull stories, and as much as whatever people want to think about anything, it is a prominent religion, which means that at some point it's probably going to make its way in here with some sort of depictions, because it's even outside of religion, as pop culture things, angels are in a lot of stuff that are religious and non-religious figures at this point. So I can definitely see something like that making it into the game.
Yeah. Interesting question though. Thank you, Dracogus. That was fun to chat about. So
yeah, for sure.
All right, so this is going to be our 2 for today. We still have a number of questions on the list. But what I'm going to start telling people is, if you want to get, we'll get through these eventually, but if you want to get your question into an episode here, I think we're always going to be trying to do 1 or 2 at the end of these, as long as we have time. So just feel free to leave it in a comment on the video down below. Or email, you can just email maindeckgames@gmail.com and do a subject that says Fleeting Thoughts Mailbag. So you put that in the subject, and that will help me sort things out. And we'd love to just answer your questions as we go. So really appreciate you asking them.
Yeah, thank you guys very much. We love hearing what you guys want to know, and hopefully answering it to the best of our abilities. But as the day comes to a close, those were our fleeting thoughts. Thank you guys very much for watching, and we look forward to chatting with you guys in 2 weeks.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.